The morning sun rose over New Eden Colony like it had for the past 10 years, since humans first landed on this quiet world at the edge of known space. The planet Kepler 442b spun slowly around its yellow star, and 3,000 human settlers called this place home. They had come here to build something simple and good away from the busy politics of Earth and the inner colonies. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the small defense station he commanded and watched the daily life of the colony begin. Below him, children ran between the houses while their parents prepared for another day of farming and building. The defense station was really just a glorified communication post with a few sensors and emergency medical supplies. Jake often joked that his biggest challenge was fixing broken farming equipment and treating scraped knees. Down in the main settlement, Lisa Campbell unlocked the doors of the community school, where she taught 43 children ranging from age 5 to 15. Her assistant, Ben Clark, helped her set up the learning tablets for the day's lessons. Ben used to be an engineer on one of the big space stations, but he said teaching kids was more rewarding than fixing machines all day. The Rodriguez family was busy preparing for something special. Their daughter, Amy, was turning 8 years old today, and the whole colony planned to celebrate with her. Maria Rodriguez hung colorful decorations outside their house, while her husband Carlos checked the cooking equipment for the big party planned that evening. Amy bounced around excitedly in her new blue dress that her grandmother had sent from Earth. Other families went about their normal routines. The Johnson family tended their crop fields that produced the special grains that traders came to buy. The Garcia children helped their parents with the livestock that provided meat and dairy for the colony. The Patel family ran the small manufacturing shop that made tools and spare parts everyone needed. Everyone knew everyone else in New Eden. When someone got sick, the whole community helped. When crops failed in one sector, the other farmers shared their harvest. When children were born, the entire colony celebrated. This was the kind of life that many humans dreamed about when they looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Jake Morrison checked his communication equipment like he did every morning. The long-range sensors showed normal space, traffic in the system. A few merchant ships moved through the outer planets, but nothing unusual. The nearest human defense corps base was 6 days away by the fastest ship, so Jake took his job of watching for problems very seriously. In the school, Lisa Campbell gathered her students for the morning assembly. She smiled as she looked at their eager faces. Some of these children had been born here on New Eden and had never seen another world. Others had come with their families from Earth or the inner colonies. All of them were excited about Amy's birthday party that evening, and it was hard to keep them focused on their lessons. Ben Clark worked with the older students on engineering projects while Lisa taught the younger ones basic reading and mathematics. The children learned about Earth history and human culture, but they also learned practical skills they would need as adults on New Eden. Everyone expected these children would grow up to take over the colony someday and continue building the community their parents had started. At the edge of the solar system, something moved in the darkness between stars. Ships began to drop out of hyperspace in formations that would have alarmed Jake Morrison if his sensors had been powerful enough to detect them at that distance. But the defense station's equipment was designed to watch for asteroids and lost. Merchant ships, not military fleets, approaching from deep space. The Galactic Council had been watching human expansion for years with growing concern. Species like the Zephyrians believed that humans moved too fast and claimed too much territory without asking permission from the established galactic powers. High Chancellor Vextar had convinced the Council that humans needed to learn their place in the galaxy before they caused more problems. The decision had been made in the Great Council chambers far from human space. New Eden would serve as an example to other human colonies about what happened when humans expanded into areas. The Council considered off-limits. The attack would be quick and documented so that other human settlements would understand the consequences of unauthorized expansion. What the Galactic Council did not understand was that they were about to break the one rule that every civilized species had learned through painful experience. Never attack human children. Never harm the innocent ones that humans spent their lives protecting and nurturing. The Council thought they were sending a message about territorial boundaries, but they were actually about to start something much bigger and more dangerous than they could imagine. Amy Rodriguez put on her birthday dress and ran outside to play with her friends while the adults prepared for her party. She had no idea that ships were moving through space toward her home. None of the children playing in the fields and gardens of New Eden knew that their peaceful life was about to end. Their parents worked and planned and dreamed about the future while death approached from the stars above. The Zephyrian fleet appeared above New Eden without warning, like dark clouds forming in a clear sky. 27 sleek warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation and cast shadows over the peaceful agricultural domes below. Fleet. Commander Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the human settlement with cold satisfaction. His orders from the Galactic Council were simple and direct. Destroy the illegal human colony completely, and make sure the destruction was recorded for broadcast to other human settlements. The message needed to be clear that humans who expanded into Council space without permission would face immediate consequences. Kethmore had destroyed settlements before, and this would be no different from any other military operation. Jake Morrison was checking supply inventories when his sensors suddenly screamed warnings at him. His equipment had finally detected the alien fleet now that they were close enough to register on his limited scanning systems. Jake's blood went cold as he realized what he was looking at. These were not merchant ships or peaceful explorers. These were warships in attack formation, and they were positioned directly above New Eden. His fingers moved frantically over the communication controls as he tried to send emergency signals to Earth and the nearest Human Defense Corps stations. The transmission equipment was designed for routine communications, not emergency military alerts, but Jake managed to boost the signal strength by overloading several systems. His message went out on all frequencies in the desperate hope that someone would receive it and understand what was happening. The words that Jake Morrison transmitted would echo across the galaxy and change everything that came after. Emergency transmission from New Eden Colony. We are under attack by unknown alien fleet. They killed children. Repeat, they killed children. Send help. The transmission cut off as the first plasma beams from the Zephyrian ships struck his defense station and turned it into glowing debris. Down in the colony, the attack began without mercy or hesitation. Plasma cannons fired from orbit and turned buildings into ash and molten metal. The community center where Amy Rodriguez was supposed to have her birthday party vanished in a flash of superheated gas. The crop fields that fed the colony burned as energy weapons swept across the landscape in methodical patterns. Lisa Campbell was teaching her afternoon class when the first explosions shook the school building. Through the windows, she could see the terrible light of plasma strikes hitting buildings across the settlement. Ben Clark grabbed her arm and pointed toward the old mining tunnel that connected to the school basement. The tunnel had been converted into a storm shelter, but it might protect them from the orbital bombardment. She gathered her students and tried to keep them calm as Ben led them down into the underground shelter. 12 children made it into the bunker before a plasma strike hit the main school building and sealed the tunnel entrance with tons of collapsed rock and twisted metal. Lisa held the frightened children close while Ben worked frantically to activate the shelter's emergency life support systems. The bombardment continued for 18 minutes and 37 seconds. The Zephyrians were thorough and efficient in their destruction. Every building was targeted and eliminated. Every vehicle was destroyed. Every sign of human presence was methodically erased from the surface of New Eden. Commander Kethmore watched the destruction with professional satisfaction as his crews documented everything for the Council's propaganda broadcasts. In the underground shelter, 12 children and 2 adults huddled in darkness and tried to understand what had happened to their world. 10-year-old Danny Foster, whose parents had run the colony's communication systems, tried not to cry as he realized his family was gone. 8-year-old Sarah Kim held her stuffed animal and asked Lisa when her parents would come find her. Amy Rodriguez still wore her birthday dress, but it was now torn and dirty from the desperate run to the shelter. Ben Clark used his engineering knowledge to repair the shelter's damaged systems, while Lisa tried to keep the children calm and hopeful. The emergency food supplies would last for several days if they were careful. The air recycling system was working, but barely. The communication equipment had been damaged in the bombardment, but Ben thought he might be able to fix it if he could find the right spare parts in the shelter's emergency supplies. Above ground, the Zephyrian fleet finished their work and prepared to leave. Commander Kethmore filed his mission report with confidence that the human problem had been solved efficiently and completely. The destruction of New Eden would serve as a clear warning to other human colonies about the consequences of unauthorized expansion into Galactic Council territory. What Commander Kethmore did not know was that Jake Morrison's final transmission had reached its destination. Emergency relay stations throughout human space had picked up the signal and forwarded it toward Earth and the major colony worlds. The message was short and desperate, but it contained the 3 words that would change everything. They killed children. For 3 days, the survivors waited in their underground tomb while Lisa rationed the food and Ben worked to repair their communication equipment. The children asked questions that had no good answers. They wanted to know when their parents would come. They wanted to know why the aliens had attacked them. They wanted to know if they would ever see the sun again. Amy Rodriguez celebrated her 8th birthday in darkness, surrounded by friends who had lost everything they had ever known. Lisa sang happy birthday to her in a whisper, while Ben shared a small piece of emergency chocolate that he had been saving. It was not the party that Amy had dreamed about, but it would become the birthday that the galaxy would never forget. On the 4th day, Ben finally managed to get the emergency transmitter working. His signal was weak and might not reach beyond the local system, but he had to try. The message he sent was simple and desperate. This is New Eden Emergency Shelter. 12 children and 2 adults survived the attack. We need immediate rescue. Please help us. The signal traveled out into space, where it was picked up by the first rescue ships that had finally arrived to investigate Jake Morrison's emergency transmission. What they found was a dead world and a crater where New Eden had been. But from the crater came a weak signal and the voice of Ben Clark asking for help. The rescue ships that arrived at New Eden found a world that had been murdered. Captain Steve Miller of the Human Defense Corps vessel Hartford stared at the crater, where a thriving colony had existed just days before. His sensors showed no life, signs anywhere on the planet's surface, until his communication officer picked up Ben Clark's weak distress signal coming from underground. It took 6 hours of careful digging to reach the emergency shelter, where 12 children and 2 adults had survived the orbital bombardment that killed everyone else they had ever known. When the rescue team finally broke through the collapsed tunnel, Amy Rodriguez was the first child to emerge from the darkness. She still wore her torn birthday dress and clutched a stuffed animal that had somehow survived the destruction of her world. The images of those 12 children being carried from the ruins of New Eden traveled across human space faster than any ship could fly. Every human colony and space station received the news within hours through the emergency communication networks that Jake Morrison's final transmission had activated. The galaxy watched as 8-year-old Amy Rodriguez looked around at the crater, where her home used to be, and asked when her parents were coming back. On Earth, President Helen Carter called an emergency session of the Human Colonial Congress, while Admiral Roy Stevens began mobilizing every available warship in the human defense. Course Fleet, But the real response to New Eden began in places that the Galactic Council had never considered important, in research laboratories and manufacturing centers and ordinary homes across human space. People began making decisions that would reshape the galaxy. Dr. Patricia Wells had been working on improved fusion drive systems for civilian transport ships when the news from New Eden reached her laboratory on Mars. She looked at her research data and realized that the same technology could be used to build warships faster and more deadly than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Within hours, her entire team had volunteered to work around the clock on military applications of their peaceful research. Tony Liu managed asteroid mining operations in the belt between Mars and Jupiter, where his crews extracted rare metals for construction projects throughout human space. When he saw the pictures of the children emerging from the ruins of New Eden, he made a simple decision. Every gram of military-grade materials his operation could produce would be shipped immediately to the shipyards, where Dr. Wells's new warship designs were being built. The response came from ordinary humans who had never thought of themselves as warriors. Maria Santos ran a small restaurant near the Luna City spaceport where she served home-cooked meals to travelers and freight crews. She closed her restaurant and enlisted in the Human Marine Corps the day after she saw Amy Rodriguez on the news broadcasts. Kevin Brown was an accountant who managed supply contracts for civilian shipping companies. He used his knowledge of interstellar trade networks to organize the flow of weapons and equipment to human military units. Engineer Carol Reed had been designing new types of space habitats for growing human populations, but she put aside those peaceful plans and began working on warship designs that prioritized speed and firepower over everything else. Her new ships would be built for one purpose only: to make sure that what happened to New Eden never happened again to any human settlement anywhere in the galaxy. The survivors of New Eden were taken to a secure medical facility on Mars where Dr. Janet Mills worked with them to help them deal with the terrible things they had experienced. But 10-year-old Danny Foster had ideas of his own about how to respond to the attack on his home. He had learned about communication systems from his parents, and he began working with Ben Clark to modify emergency broadcast equipment. Their message went out to every human settlement on frequencies that could reach the most distant colonies. Danny's voice was young, but his words were clear and determined. "This is Danny Foster from New Eden. We remember what they did to us. We remember Amy's birthday party. We remember everyone who died. They made a mistake when they hurt us. We are going to make sure they know it." The message spread through human space like wildfire, as it was repeated and retransmitted by every colony and space station. Children across the galaxy heard Danny Foster's voice and understood that something fundamental had changed. The adults who protected them were no longer willing to accept that human settlements could be destroyed without consequences. Intelligence reports reaching the Galactic Council showed massive human military mobilization, but what worried Council analysts more were reports of civilian involvement in the war effort. Entire human populations seemed to be organizing for conflict, not just their professional military forces. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were retooling to manufacture weapons. Research facilities were abandoning peaceful projects to work on military technology. High Chancellor Vextar reviewed these reports with growing concern and called for an emergency council session to discuss the human response to the New Eden operation. The destruction of one small colony was supposed to demonstrate council authority and discourage further human expansion. Instead, it seemed to have triggered something that the council had not anticipated. The Zephyrian intelligence services reported that human behavior patterns had changed dramatically since the New Eden attack. Peaceful human traders were asking detailed questions about council military capabilities. Human diplomats were making quiet contact with non-council species. Human colonies were requesting increased defense assistance and building fortifications. Most disturbing of all were the reports about human children. Schools throughout human space had begun teaching military history and basic engineering alongside traditional subjects. Children were learning about weapons technology and space combat tactics as part of their regular education. The attack on New Eden had not just mobilized human adults, but had also changed the way human society was preparing its next generation. Dr. Patricia Wells completed her first prototype warship design 6 months after New Eden was destroyed. The vessel incorporated fusion drive technology that made it faster than any known ship in the galaxy and weapon systems that could destroy targets with precision that made existing defense systems obsolete. But more than that, it was designed to be operated by crews who had grown up hearing the stories of what happened to Amy Rodriguez and her friends. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity did not just build armies to fight wars. They built societies that would never forget an attack on their children and would never stop working to prevent it from happening again. The Galactic Council had thought they were teaching humans about the limits of expansion, but instead, they had taught them about the price of leaving their children unprotected. 6 months after the destruction of New Eden, the human response began in earnest, but it was not what the Galactic Council had expected. Instead of desperate attacks against Council strongholds, humanity began something far more systematic and terrifying. They started taking apart the Council's civilization piece by piece, with the methodical precision of engineers solving a complex problem. Captain Alex Turner commanded the stealth destroyer Retribution, one of 50 identical ships built in record time using resources diverted from every human colony in space. The ship incorporated Dr. Patricia Wells's revolutionary fusion drive technology and weapon systems designed by Carol Reed's engineering teams. But more than advanced technology, the Retribution carried a crew that had been recruited from volunteers who remembered New Eden and would never forget what had been done to human children. Their mission was simple and direct: eliminate any galactic Council military presence that could threaten human civilian populations. The Zephyrian patrol fleet that had been maintaining order in the Outer Rim systems simply vanished one day. Search and rescue teams found their ships weeks later, drifting empty in space with no signs of what had happened to their crews. The only evidence left behind were small data pods containing footage of Amy Rodriguez's birthday party and a simple message: "This is for New Eden." Meanwhile, communications specialist Rita Johnson worked with the surviving children of New Eden to begin broadcasting throughout Council space. Their message was not one of conquest or territorial demands, but something far more dangerous to the Council's authority. They simply told the story of Amy Rodriguez's birthday party and asked every species in the galaxy a simple question: "Is this the civilization you want to be part of?" The effect was immediate and devastating to Council unity. Species that had long accepted Council authority because it provided stability and order began asking uncomfortable questions about what their government had done in their name. The Altarian Confederacy withdrew from 3 joint military operations, citing moral concerns about Council tactics. The Procyon Trade Guild suspended all commercial contracts with Council members and began seeking new partners among non-Council species. Even within Zephyrian territory, some colony worlds began expressing doubts about their government's actions. When footage of the New Eden survivors emerged from their underground shelter, it was broadcast on communication networks throughout the galaxy, despite Council attempts to suppress it. Citizens who had never questioned their government's authority began organizing protests and demanding answers about why their military had attacked human children. The first major military engagement came when a Council enforcement fleet attempted to blockade the human colony on Proxima Station to prevent further human expansion in that sector. Commander Nick Palmer's task force did not attempt to break the blockade through conventional tactics. Instead, they demonstrated the new reality of human military capability by destroying the entire Council fleet in less than 4 minutes. 37. Council ships were eliminated with precision strikes that disabled their weapons and life support systems, but left their crews alive to be evacuated by human boarding parties. Each surviving Council officer was given the same message before being released: "This is for New Eden. Tell your superiors that humans do not forget attacks on children, and we do not forgive those who kill innocents. The speed and precision of the human victory at Proxima Station sent shockwaves throughout Council space. Military analysts who studied the battle recordings realized that human technology had advanced far beyond anything in the Council arsenal. The new human warships moved faster than existing sensors could track and struck targets with accuracy that made Council defensive systems completely obsolete. But more disturbing than the technological advantage was the human willingness to use. Council intelligence reports showed that human military commanders were not interested in traditional rules of engagement or diplomatic protocols. They identified threats to human civilians and eliminated them with the efficiency of extermination crews dealing with dangerous pests. High Chancellor Vexi Tar was removed from office by an emergency council vote as member species began demanding explanations for the disaster he had created. The new moderate coalition, led by Chancellor Drina of the Altarian Confederacy, desperately sought ways to end the conflict before it completely destroyed the galactic order that had maintained peace for centuries. Their attempts at diplomatic contact were met with polite but firm responses from human representatives. Ambassador Linda Hayes informed Council negotiators that humanity was not interested in traditional peace talks or territorial compromises. The humans had simple demands that were not open to negotiation. The Council would accept full responsibility for New Eden and submit to war crimes tribunals. All species would have the right to self-determination without Council interference. Any future attacks on civilians would be met with complete destruction of the aggressor's military capabilities. Dr. Janet Mills, who had worked with the New Eden. Survivors provided psychological profiles of human leadership to help Council negotiators understand what they were facing. Her reports made it clear that the attack on New Eden had fundamentally changed human society in ways that the Council had not anticipated. The humans were not fighting a territorial war or seeking galactic domination. They were fighting to ensure that no other human children would ever experience what Amy Rodriguez and her friends had survived. Danny Foster, now 12 years old, had become a symbol of human determination as he worked with human military communications networks to coordinate information sharing between human colonies and sympathetic alien species. His broadcasts reached every corner of the galaxy and carried a simple message that resonated with parents of every species. We protect our children. We remember those who hurt them. We make sure it never happens again. The galaxy was learning that humanity had not just built a military response to the New Eden attack. They had built a civilization dedicated to the protection of innocence, and they were systematically dismantling any power structure that threatened children. The Galactic Council's attempt to teach humans about the limits of expansion had instead taught the galaxy about the consequences of attacking human families. Council member species faced a choice between supporting a government that had attacked children or joining the growing alliance of species that had chosen to follow humanity's example of protecting the innocent. As more species chose to abandon the Council, the galactic order that had existed for centuries began to crumble, and something new began to take its place. 1 year after the destruction of New Eden, the Galactic Council faced a reality they had never imagined possible. They were losing a war they had started against a species they had completely underestimated, the carefully constructed galactic order that had maintained stability for centuries was collapsing as species after species withdrew from the Council alliance and declared independence from its authority. Chancellor Drina of the Altarian Confederacy, who had replaced the disgraced Vextar, desperately sought a peaceful resolution to the conflict that was tearing apart everything their civilization had built. Emergency sessions of the remaining council members produced nothing but arguments and blame, as each species tried to distance itself from the decision to attack New Eden while finding ways to end the human military response. The humans, however, seemed completely uninterested in traditional diplomatic solutions. Ambassador Linda Hayes arrived at the emergency peace talks, accompanied by a delegation that included some of the New Eden survivors. 14-year-old Danny Foster now wore a junior communications officer uniform and served as a technical advisor to the human negotiating team. 10-year-old Amy Rodriguez, the birthday girl who had become the symbol of human determination, sat quietly at the conference table and reminded everyone present why they were there. The council's opening demands reflected their desperate desire to return to the old order. Humanity would withdraw from all disputed territories and accept council authority over future expansion. Human military development would be subject to council oversight and inspection. Human colonies would accept council governance in exchange for protection and trade rights. In return, the council would formally apologize for the New Eden incident and provide financial compensation to the survivors. Ambassador Hayes listened to these demands with polite attention and then delivered humanity's response in words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. No, we reject your authority completely. We do not recognize your right to govern human expansion or development. We do not accept your apologies or your money. We have different terms for ending this conflict. The human terms were as simple as they were revolutionary. The Galactic Council would be dissolved immediately and replaced with a new democratic, governing body that included representation for all species based on population and territorial holdings. All sapient species would have the absolute right to self-determination and protection from external aggression. Most importantly, any deliberate attack on civilian populations, especially children, would be considered a crime against all sentient life, subject to immediate military intervention. When council representatives objected that these terms were impossible, to accept Danny Foster activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation throughout the galaxy. Human fleets now controlled 17 major trade routes that connected council territory. 43 council member species had withdrawn from the alliance and declared neutrality or active support for human positions. Human colonies had successfully defended themselves against all council military action and were expanding into new territories despite council objections. The message was clear and undeniable. The council could accept humanity's terms for a new galactic order, or they could watch their civilization continue to crumble around them as more species chose independence over submission to an authority that had proven itself willing to murder children for political convenience. Dr. Janet Mills, who had spent months working with the New Eden survivors, delivered the psychological analysis that explained why traditional diplomatic solutions would not work. The attack on New Eden changed human society in fundamental ways that you do not understand. Every human alive today knows the story of Amy's birthday party and what happened to her colony. They have made a collective decision that this will never happen again to any children anywhere in the galaxy. She continued with words that made the council representatives understand the true scope of what they faced. You attacked human children because you thought it would make humans afraid and compliant. Instead, you taught them that some things are worth fighting for no matter what the cost. Every human military officer knows that they are protecting not just their own children, but the children of every species that chooses to stand with them against aggression. The council faced detailed evidence of how completely their position had deteriorated. Human technology had advanced to the point where council military forces were essentially obsolete. Human diplomatic efforts had created a new alliance of species based on mutual protection rather than domination. Human economic initiatives had established trade networks that bypassed council control entirely. Most damaging of all was the moral authority that humans had gained by positioning themselves as protectors of innocent life. Species throughout. The galaxy had seen the footage of human rescue teams digging children out of the ruins of New Eden and contrasted it with images of council ships bombarding civilian targets. The choice between supporting child killers or child protectors was not difficult for most civilized beings to make. Amy Rodriguez, who had been silent throughout most of the negotiations, finally spoke near the end of the sessions. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had happened since her 8th birthday party was interrupted by orbital bombardment. I want other children to be safe. I want their birthday parties to be happy. I want their parents to come home every day. That is what we are fighting for. The remaining council members faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They could accept the new reality that humanity had created through superior technology, moral authority, and determination, or they could continue fighting a war they could not win against an enemy that would never stop protecting children. Chancellor. Drina looked around the conference table at representatives of species that had once feared council authority and now saw humans as their protectors and liberators. She realized that the old order was already gone and that the only question remaining was whether the transition to whatever came next would be peaceful or require more demonstrations of human military capability. The council members requested a recess to consider the human terms, but everyone in the room knew that the real negotiations were already over. The galaxy would be reorganized according to human principles of protecting innocent life and ensuring the rights of all species to determine their own futures. The only question was whether the former council leaders would participate in building the new order or be swept aside by it. 2 years after the attack on New Eden, the galaxy operated under completely new rules that no one could have imagined before human children were murdered for political convenience. The Galactic Council had been dissolved and replaced by the interspecies. Cooperative, a democratic body where every sapient species had representation based on population territorial holdings and contribution to galactic welfare rather than military power or ancient claims to authority. The first law passed by this new government was simple and absolute in its scope. The deliberate targeting of children or other non-combatant civilians of any species anywhere in the galaxy would be considered a crime against all sentient life, subject to immediate intervention by the joint military forces of all member species. There would be no exceptions, no diplomatic immunity, and no statute of limitations for those who chose to harm innocents. Amy Rodriguez, now 12 years old, cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony of the New Eden Memorial Station, built on the exact site where her birthday party had been interrupted by death from the stars. The station served multiple purposes, as both a monument to those who had died and a training facility for the new Interspecies Defense Corps, a joint military organization dedicated to protecting civilians of all species from aggression. The memorial wall contained the names of everyone who had died in the bombardment, but the centerpiece was a holographic display showing the birthday party that had been planned for Amy's 8th birthday. Visitors could watch the preparations that had been interrupted by plasma fire and see the decorations that had been destroyed, along with everyone who had helped plan the celebration. The message was clear that the galaxy would remember not just the attack, but the innocent joy that had been murdered. Danny Foster had been accepted into the Accelerated Education Program on Earth, where he worked with engineers like Carol Reed to design communication systems that would keep all member species connected and secure. His goal was to ensure that no other colony would ever face the isolation that New Eden had experienced in its final moments when Jake Morrison's desperate transmission was the only thing standing between the settlement and complete anonymity. In death, Captain Alex Turner now commanded the INS Harmony, a joint human-Altarian vessel that patrolled the major trade routes, ensuring that the new laws were respected and that civilian populations of all species could live without fear of attack. His crew included former Council military officers who had learned to appreciate humanity's approach to protecting innocent life. The ship's motto, suggested by one of his Zephyrian communications officers, was simple and direct. For all children, everywhere. The former High Chancellor Vextar served a life sentence in a rehabilitation facility where he was required to study human culture and history as part of his psychological treatment. His therapist, Dr. Janet Mills, regularly reminded him that his decision to attack New Eden had not only destroyed a human colony, but had ultimately brought down the entire galactic order he had tried to preserve through intimidation and violence. During their sessions, Vextar struggled to understand how such a small action could have produced such enormous consequences. Dr. Mills explained that he had made the fundamental error of believing that humans would respond to the murder of their children, the same way that council species had always responded to demonstrations of superior force. Instead, he had triggered something in human nature that the galaxy had never encountered before. In a speech at the 5th anniversary memorial service, President Helen Carter reflected on the changes that had swept through galactic civilization since that terrible day. New Eden was meant to be a demonstration of council power and authority. Instead, it became a demonstration of something far more powerful. What happens when you threaten the children of a species that believes every child in the galaxy deserves to grow up safe and loved and protected? Ambassador Linda Hayes now served as the first human Secretary General of the Interspecies Cooperative and had established the final tradition of the annual memorial service. Every year on Amy Rodriguez's birthday, every human settlement space station and starship would observe a moment of silence. Not just for those lost at New Eden, but as a reminder of the responsibility that came with the power to protect innocent life throughout the galaxy. The ceremony also included representatives from the 47 species that had joined the cooperative since its founding. Each delegation brought children from their own species to participate in the memorial activities and to learn about the price that had been paid for their current safety and freedom. Young beings of dozens of different species played together in the memorial gardens, while their parents worked together to ensure that such games could continue without fear. Amy Rodriguez had chosen to follow in Ambassador Hayes's footsteps and was training to become a diplomat herself, with the goal of expanding the cooperative to include every sapient species in the galaxy. She often ended her speeches at diplomatic gatherings with the same words that had echoed across the galaxy during humanity's darkest hour. We remember what happened. We remember why it happened. We make sure it never happens again. The galaxy had learned through bitter experience that there were some lines that should never be crossed and some prices that were too high to pay for political convenience. The first law of the galaxy was not written in legal documents or diplomatic treaties or constitutional frameworks. It was written in the hearts and minds of every species that had witnessed what happened when someone made the fatal mistake of attacking human children. Educational curricula throughout cooperative space now included the story of New Eden as a fundamental lesson about the consequences of choosing violence against innocence. Children of every species learned about Amy's birthday party and the price that the galaxy had paid for allowing such attacks to happen. They also learned about the responsibility they would inherit to protect future generations from those who would harm children for any reason. The Galactic Council had thought they were teaching humanity a lesson about knowing their place in the established order of galactic civilization. Instead, they had learned a lesson about the true nature of power and the price of wisdom. The galaxy was forever changed by the understanding that the greatest strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the determination to protect those who could not protect themselves.